Imagine a year where rock music was redefined, not by a single explosion, but by a three-way clash of titans. 1973 wasn't just another year, it was a battle for the very soul of rock and roll, fought in the trenches of the album charts. Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, and the Rolling Stones, each vying to claim the crown and set the course for a new era. Credits: Far Out Atlantic Records, Tamla. Sunday the 26th of October, 2025, 1830, UK. The rapid demise of movements is often shocking. The optimistic spirit of the 1960s, with its ideals of peace and love, seemed to vanish almost overnight. The shadow of the Manson murders replaced those ideals with a sense of paranoia and distrust. The 1970s, in contrast, wasn't defined by a single, unifying movement. Instead, it was a decade of diverse and often subversive statements. This was especially true in the realm of classic rock. Was it even classic rock yet? What was it becoming? And who would lead the charge? The spring and summer of 1973 provided a dramatic answer, as three British giants locked horns in a fierce competition for rock's future. The battle initially unfolded as a two-way contest for album chart dominance. On March 1st, Pink Floyd unveiled their masterpiece, Dark Side of the Moon. Initially, it was an oddity. The band had struggled to find its footing after Syd Barrett's departure. They knew they needed to honor his psychedelic legacy, and with Dark Side, they seemed to have discovered a new, accessible sound. Roger Waters, in an interview with Billboard, recalled the moment he knew they had something special. When the record was finished, I took a reel-to-reel copy home with me, and I remember playing it for my wife then, and I remember her bursting into tears when it was finished. And I thought, this has obviously struck a chord somewhere, and I was kinda pleased by that. You know when you've done something, he continued, certainly if you create a piece of music, you then hear it with fresh ears when you play it for somebody else. And at that point I thought to myself, wow, this is a pretty complete piece of work, and I had every confidence that people would respond to it. But what made Dark Side of the Moon so groundbreaking? The key word is complete. The album seamlessly blended structured songwriting with a cohesive concept, revolutionary production by Alan Parsons, profound philosophical themes, and innovative instrumentation, creating an audiophile's paradise. This coincided with the rise of FM radio, which provided a platform for more experimental and expansive music. Dark Side of the Moon seemed to define a new era in music. But here's where it gets controversial. While Dark Side of the Moon eventually achieved the staggering feat of remaining on the charts for 741 consecutive weeks, it debuted in the US at a modest number 95. This was because the band envisioned the album as a unified whole and chose not to release any singles beforehand. It was a bold statement, a challenge to the conventional music industry. Pink Floyd weren't alone in pushing boundaries and defying expectations. Led Zeppelin, known for releasing only 15 singles throughout their entire career, were also preparing their bid for rock supremacy in March '73. Houses of the Holy followed a string of four iconic albums. How could they possibly top Led Zeppelin for one of the best-selling albums of all time? They didn't even try. Instead, they broadened their sonic palette. With reggae influences on a Dio Macca and funk elements on The Crunch, along with the sweeping orchestration of the Rain song, inspired by George Harrison's advice to write a ballad, Led Zeppelin aimed for a different kind of completeness. The album showcased a diverse range of influences, unified by the band's signature raw power. In essence, Houses of the Holy declared that if you can play anything, you can be anything. And Led Zeppelin did just that, never losing sight of their raw power and rock and roll roots. This, too, took some getting used to. This wasn't a typical overnight chart success, it was a slow burn, a gradual ascent to the top. Despite being released in March in the US, Houses of the Holy didn't reach the #1 spot until May. The chart battle was a rollercoaster ride, with Dark Side of the Moon briefly holding the top position before being dethroned by Elvis Presley's Aloha from Hawaii. Led Zeppelin then claimed the crown for 2 weeks, followed by former Beatles Paul McCartney and George Harrison with Red Rose Speedway and Living in the Material World respectively. And this is the part most people miss. While these former Beatles achieved chart success, it was clear that they had largely moved beyond rock and roll in the purest sense. The Rolling Stones, however, were determined to prove that they were still the true inheritors of rock's legacy. In August, they released Goat's Head Soup, recorded in Jamaica. Ironically, the reggae influences seemed to bring them back to their roots. The band had faced intense criticism following the Altamont tragedy. Goat's Head Soup represented a crucial moment, a conscious effort to temper their rebellious image. For a while, it was unclear whether this strategy would work. Their climb to #1 was a slow and steady one, finally overtaking Chicago a month after the album's release. With ballads like Banji, Goat's Head Soup was, to some extent, a more mature album. It seemed that rock albums, moving forward, would need to evolve and mature as younger generations began to subvert rather than imitate. In the process, the band dominated commercially, proving that the old guard would always have a place in the music world, a truth that remains evident today. But what does it all mean? These 3 albums, released in quick succession, didn't engage in the kind of public feuding seen between Blur and Oasis. However, they represented 3 distinct pillars of rock and roll that continue to exist: experimentation and conceptualization, Pink Floyd; heaviness and Polish, Led Zeppelin; and old-school riffs, the Rolling Stones. Perhaps the most telling footnote of 1973 is that the album which held the top spot for the longest duration was Goodbye Yellow Brick Road by Elton John. This raises a crucial question: had rock and roll, as the dominant art form, been supplanted by pop? Related topics. Never miss a beat. The Far Out Led Zeppelin newsletter. All the latest stories about Led Zeppelin from the independent voice of culture. Straight to your inbox. So, what do you think? Did one of these bands truly win the battle for the soul of rock in 1973? Or did Elton John's pop dominance signal a shift in the musical landscape? Share your thoughts in the comments below.